Hello and welcome everyone. We'll be starting a new series on completing NCERTs. The main topics that we'll be covering through NCERTs will be history, geography, polity and economy, plus internal security and international relations that will be covered in political science part. Art and culture that will be covered through history. So without any delay, let's get started. So we are covering class 12th NCERT of history given in 3 parts. So starting from part 1, there are 3 parts given in the history of class 12th. Basically, the whole history is compiled alongside the art and culture of those periods. And this is more of a thematical understanding of history rather than understanding it fact by fact. Starting from the part 1, which is basically the ancient history part. The first chapter of ancient history is the Harappan civilization or the Indus Valley civilization, of course, which has been named as bricks, beads, and bones. Simply signifies the dominance of art and architectural part of this period. Besides art and architecture, we'll also look upon the urbanization as well as how Indus Valley civilization communicated with other civilizations. We'll be looking into the connection between Indus Valley civilization and Mesopotamian civilization during this. The second chapter, Kings, Farmers and Towns, basically covers the time period of 600 BC to 600 AD. 600 BC to 600 AD is that time period which starts from Vedic era and ends up till the Gupta era. So I'll be reading about the emergence of Vedic period. Vedic period is also divided into 2 parts, that is early Vedic and later Vedic. Eventually we'll go to the Mahajanpada part and eventually the Indo-Greek kings, that is the foreign invasion, kings of foreign descent, as well as we'll be coming to the Guptas. Contemporary to Guptas, we'll be looking upon the emergence of regional kings, that is the Cheras, Cholas and Pandyas. That is the second chapter. Eventually, looking up to the third chapter of ancient history is kinship, caste, and class. Looks upon the same timeline, that is the 600 BC to 600 AD. It actually focuses on the society of that time. We'll be looking up the books written during that, mainly the Dharma Shastras, that is Manusmriti and all. The 4 Varna system. Besides 2 Varna system, the emergence of jatis and guilds, that is shrenis of traders. Eventually, thinkers, beliefs, and buildings, the cultural development from 600 BC to 600 AD. The chapter mainly talks about the Buddhas and Jainas, that is the emergence of Buddhism and Jainism and other sects beyond Hinduism. Because by the end of 600 AD, there was a dominance of Hindu Varna Vyavastha. We'll be looking into the new belief system and the modernization of society, or you can say the reformation of the society, Indian society, through Buddhism and Jainism lens. We'll also be looking into some of the schools of philosophy, that is Ajivika School of Philosophy, Charvak School of Philosophy, etc. As well as a lot of new kinds of buildings that will be emerging, especially the stupa. Stupa itself is a topic of discussion on architecture. And besides, we'll be talking about the languages that emerged, different languages, that is the Pali, Prakrit, alongside Sanskrit. Before coming down to part 2, we'll be looking into the pictures, 2 pictures given here. First one is the copper plate, one of the earliest metal to be discovered. A whole period is named after it, the Chalcolithic period. And this one here is a very important sculpture of Satvahana king with his wife. So Satvahana kingdom was itself a very important kingdom of ancient India. The ruling class, the kings and queens, had to belong to the Kshatriya clan or the Kshatriya Varna, but Satvahanas belonged to Brahmins. Besides, the society of Satvahana was matrilineal society, that is, they took the name of their mother rather than taking the name of their father. One of the very famous Satvahana king is Gautami Putra Satkarni, commonly known as GPS, we'll be calling it. Besides GPS, there was his son, Vashishti Putra Pulwami. He himself was a matrilineal king who married to the Kshatriya princess of different clan. So we'll be reading about both of them, Gautami Putra Satkarni and Vashishti Putra Pulwami. Coming down to part 2, that is the medieval history. First chapter, where we will be talking about, through the eyes of traveler, we'll be basically talking about the 3 travelers that came down to India and wrote about India. Through their lens, we know more about what India was and how the society of India worked. The first traveler we'll be talking about will be Al-Biruni. Second one we'll be talking about Ibn Battuta, the Moroccan traveler. And the third one we'll be talking about Francois Bernard from France. And beyond this, we'll be talking about many more travelers like Niccolo Conti, then Peter Mundi, coming from England, then Tavernier coming from France again. So Al-Biruni, Ibn Battuta, and Francois de Bernier will be discussed in detail alongside the work they have done, the books they have written. Coming down to the second chapter of part 2, that is Bhakti Sufi movement. Bhakti Sufi movement was actually the religious transformation movement, reform movement, not the emergence of new religion, but changing the pattern of religious following and practices. We have to remember that the fourth chapter that we will be reading in ancient history is totally different from what we'll be reading in the second chapter of part 2, that is the medieval history. In fourth chapter of ancient history, we'll be reading about the emergence of new sect inside Hinduism, that is Buddha Jana sect. Both of these sects will help in transformation of society. But in the Bhakti Sufi tradition, we'll be not talking about the emergence of new sect. We'll be talking more about the reformation of the Hinduism. In Sufism, we'll be talking about the reformation of Islamic culture. Both of these will be seen from medieval lens. So we'll be talking a bit about Mughals too, the Delhi Sultanate who followed certain aspects of Sufism. Coming to the third chapter, that is the imperial capital Vijayanagar. Vijayanagar Empire is totally known for its beautiful architecture, so we'll be talking totally about art and architecture of this period. We'll be talking about the temple architecture specifically, how Vijayanagar was seen from the aspects of different travelers. Tells us about the grandeur of Vijayanagar Empire. Whole empire was jaded with beautiful gemstones, diamonds, gold. So basically talking about the economic condition of Vijayanagar. That is, Vijayanagar was itself a very well-flourished empire. Coming down to the fourth chapter that we'll be discussing, that is the last chapter that we'll be discussing in medieval period, is the peasant, zamindar, and the state. Here we'll be discussing about the agrarian society and the Mughal Empire and the development of new taxes. Mughal period brought many taxation system, many basic land laws that were not erstwhile existing in India. Because they started standardizing methods for land laws and the taxation. Okay, before coming to the modern history part, that is the third part, we'll be talking about this beautiful architecture given here is actually the architecture or the pavilion of Jinji, part of Vijayanagar Empire temple architecture. Coming down to the third part, that is the modern history part, we'll be talking about the emergence of colonialism, that is British Empire. Not just British Empire, the part where we read about the European advent to India. The European advent has not been properly given in this part, but we'll be talking or discussing about it again and again so that we could understand more about colonialism, because Britishers were not the only ones to colonize India. Portuguese, there were French, there were Dutch before the Britishers came to India. So the first, we'll be basically discussing about the two systems, permanent settlement system and Riyatwari system. We'll not be looking into different acts of Britishers or the different policies of Britishers that we usually see or usually read about in Spectrum. I will be simply discussing about how the society changed, how the zamindars emerged, how the Riyatwas, how the Jyotidars were becoming eminent in the society. The second chapter, here we'll be discussing about the background of 1857 revolt, not the basic revolt itself, as in we'll be discussing about the Pahadias and the Santals and the tribal movements that emerged alongside 1857. So the whole take of second chapter is very different than what we basically study in the modern history part. The third chapter is basically all about Mahatma Gandhi and his revolts, the nationalist movement and the mass done by Mahatma Gandhi. It starts from civil disobedience movement, that is the Dani March part, and ends with the Quit India movement and beyond. It also discusses about independence that came with the partition of India. The fourth chapter will be discussing about the framing of constitution, the beginning of modern India or the independent India. The framing of constitution has different debates that we'll be discussing. That is, rather India should have Hindi or English as its official language. Rather, India should be a federal country or a unitary country, so forth, so on. That's the content part and basic layout of what we'll be discussing in the history NCERT.